The earliest settlers in what would become Springfield included John Polk Campbell, the Fulbright family. There were several families who all got here around the same time, around 1829, 1830, right about the time that the Delaware were being moved out of the region, and this area of Missouri was opening up for Anglo settlement. And this is a picture of Louisa Campbell, who was the widow of John Polk Campbell. I don't think there's an image of John Polk Campbell that has survived. But the Campbells were early settlers here. Of course, we still commemorate the name around Springfield in a variety of ways. And the Roundtree family, some of you know where the Roundtree neighborhood is and Roundtree School. They were one of the earliest families. A Roundtree was the first person to establish a school in what would become Springfield. And this is just gives us a little idea about how a person got to Springfield in those early days and the trouble that it was. One of the neat things that has survived is the diary of Joseph Roundtree, who was the Roundtree who settled here in Springfield. And the Roundtrees first came to the Springfield area in 1830 and came back and settled for good in 1831 and left a pretty detailed record of how they got here. The Roundtrees lived in Middle Tennessee, south of Nashville, in that area, and came all the way by horseback all the way to southwest Missouri, made at least 2 trips that we know of. The second one more in a wagon train because the families were coming and all that kind of stuff. But Roundtree mentions a lot of the places they went, how long it took them to get from one place to another. He talks about crossing the Ohio River, crossing southern Illinois, crossing the Mississippi River at Cape Girardeau. And they basically came from Cape Girardeau, came up through Potosi, through basically kind of that route we were talking about, almost where Highway 8 is, from there all the way to basically where I-44 would be today, the St. James area. Seems like they're sort of going out of the way, doesn't it? Right, that was the road. I mean, that's how, if you were traveling from that part of Missouri to southwest Missouri, that's how you went, because we know that the Cottaway Hills are in the way. If you just plowed straight across southern Missouri, you're going to traverse some pretty rough terrain, and that was an easier route to take. You go up through more settled areas, you hit that high ridge where I-44 is today, and you sort of come down that ridge to Springfield. And when he came back the second time with his family in the wintertime, and it took them 6 days. They had to wait 6 days to cross the Mississippi River. As he mentioned, there were big chunks of ice floating in the river, and it was dangerous, and the river was up. And they had to wait 6 days on the Illinois side before a ferry could get them across to the Missouri side. And they had to make several trips because they had animals with them and wagons and all that kind of stuff. And it really, when you read about the trip from there to Springfield, it's sort of funny because, I mean, it wasn't funny to them. It took them a long time. It took them a couple weeks to make this trip just from southeast Missouri to Springfield, because stuff kept breaking. Wagon wheels would break, or axles and stuff like that, and they'd have to fix something. And it was a really tough process to make that trip in those days, 500 or so miles from Middle Tennessee to southwest Missouri. But he was obviously happy with the area. He mentions in his diary that when he first came out, he came with 3 young men, and the last thing they did before they went back to get their families, the ones who were going to move to Southwest Missouri permanently, was they built 3 log cabins. They had picked out land that they wanted to settle on. They didn't own it. They just thought, hey, nobody's living here. It looks pretty good to us. We'll mark our territory by building log cabins, which they did in just a few days. You know, somebody good with an axe, good, young, strong, pioneer could throw up a log cabin in a couple of days, and that's what they did. The 4 of them working together, built these log cabins, went back to Tennessee, brought back their family. When they got back, they found a family had moved into one of the cabins that they had built, but there was no shooting or anything like that. The family agreed to leave when they found out the circumstances. If you just walk up and there's a cabin unoccupied, you probably know somebody's going to come claim it at some point, but it's good to be in the dry as long as you can, so you get in there. But it was that's the way it was. In the land office doesn't open up in Springfield until a few years later, when they actually start selling the land to these places. And by then there are dozens and dozens of families already settled here, squatting on the land. Eventually, the federal government passes what's called a preemption law, Preemption Act, which gives squatters the first opportunity to buy their land, so that you couldn't have lived somewhere and grown a crop and built fences and stuff like that, and somebody else come along and buy your land out from under you. You've got first dibs on that land. And so a lot of people did that. They would settle on a place, make improvements, as the phrase was, and then they buy the land after a while. And that's the way things worked in those days. But the Rowntrees were early settlers, and we're fortunate to have at least some record of their experiences here.